What if Tapu Fini was in Gen 1 OU? This is part 3 of my 4-part series going over every single Tapu in Gen 1. We've already gone over Tapu Koko and Tapu Bulu. One was amazing, one was not that. But how would Tapu Fini do? Because on the surface, it has monstrous stats, but the move pool doesn't really look like something that you would think would make it a massive threat. Now, like I've said with the other ones, its fairy typing is basically non-existent, doing nothing offensively or defensively. So it's basically a pure water type, which, spoiler alert, that's pretty good. And in Gen 1, I would say it's debatably even better, because not only are grass moves less common, with Razor Leaf being the only good grass move used by, to put it nicely, pretty subpar Pokemon. But not only that, but it's also, a generation where Ice is a better offensive type than it is in most gens. So, admittedly, that's still sort of a double-edged sword, because since Tapu Fini is one of those water types that actually isn't a water-ice type, it's not immune to freeze, so the water typing is still better than it usually is, which is saying a lot. But at the same time, you don't really feel comfortable being hit with ice moves, but there's no denying that resisting it is incredibly good. And its stats are also just amazing. The attack doesn't really matter. That 115 defense and 130 special defense is just holy crap, that is amazing. Its 95 special attack is also, it's good, but I would argue it's not a big deal either way. And 85 speed is also pretty good. You're faster than Cloyster. But because of how tanky Tapu Fini is, it doesn't really care that much anyways. Tapu Fini is probably going to be one of those Pokemon that you actively want to get paralyzed, because then it can't get frozen, and if it can't get frozen, then yeah, this thing just becomes a defensive monster. So in that regard, it gets speed as a non-factor, but it's a non-factor in a very good way. Now, the reason why I was dumb and assumed this thing wouldn't be too good at first is because of its move pool. Because it only really has Blizzard, Hydro Pump, Surf, technically Hyper Beam, but not very good. For the series, I'm giving all 4 of the Tapus Nature's Madness, which obviously that's an amazing move. But outside of that, it has Reflect and a Light Screen. But unlike Tapu Koko with, 130 speed, or other water types I've gone over, Mega Slowbro's super insane stats, or something like that, I guess I just looked at Tapu Fini, didn't see any real gimmick, didn't see any big flashy attack stat, so I kind of just assumed that it just wouldn't really do much. But once I did the first replay, I quickly realized just how wrong that really is. Because Tapu Fini, friendly reminder that in this generation, Light Screen and Reflect are permanent, but you just can't switch out. Or you can, but it gets rid of the screens. You get the point. Once I made that first replay, and I realized just how much of an unkillable behemoth this thing becomes, yeah, I quickly changed my mind, and I'm like, okay, this thing is actually just really, really good. It is a tanky water type, but it also just has a move that just deletes half of your HP, regardless of what your type is. Yeah, this thing is pretty dang good. There is one major flaw that Tapu Fini suffers from, however, and I was genuinely shocked when I realized this. It cannot learn Rest. What the heck? Why? How? I was dumbfounded, but I guess it makes sense, because its ability is Misty Terrain. So I'm pretty sure that means that this thing couldn't even, like, rest. Which, okay, I guess that makes sense. But I'm curious, if I were to switch this to Gen 8, where it can potentially have the hidden ability Telepathy, can it run rest now? Yes, it can. Okay, so that pretty much answered my question, which I kind of figured that was the case anyways. So I guess it makes sense that doesn't run rest in Gen 1. But man, this thing would benefit so much if it had it. Because if you gave Tapu Fini recovery, then so many of its matchups that it struggles against, it could do significantly better. To be fair, for a lot of them, it would still probably struggle anyways. But it's an option you desperately wish you had. But even without it, it's still basically unkillable. Tapu Fini's main strategy is you choose between Light Screen or Reflect. Whichever one you choose, you become unkillable and you can take on every single Pokemon with those like moves. If you're fearing Tauros or any of the physical Pokemon, giving it Reflect means that you just completely shut them down, and you can either beat them in a 1v1 very easily, or you can force them to switch out. And if you force them to switch out, you can pretty much just use Nature's Madness and just delete half their HP. Or you can do the opposite. Not only is it just pretty handy to just, use Light Screen to just soak up special moves, but also, since a lot of the Pokemon you're weak against, i.e. electric types, are special, using Light Screen can help you do better against them. But since the electric types are all super fast, it's still very dangerous. Even Tauros. Like, sometimes Tauros runs Thunderbolt just for Cloyster, and I feel like it would become more common with Tapu Fini in the format. Even with a Tauros using Thunderbolt with Light Screen, yeah, you go back to just winning that matchup, but it's still a Tauros, a high crit rate, so it's still very dangerous either way. But I think both Light Screen and Reflect are equally valid, and depending on which one you use just means that something on the opponent's team will just be forced to switch out. And the neat thing is, because of how high both of its stats are anyways, even with the one that you don't use, you could still very easily stand up to the Pokemon. Granted, with electric types, Jolteon and Zapdos do 60% without Light Screen, and yeah, it hurts a lot. But against Psychics, Surfs, Blizzards, etc., you tank those pretty good. And same goes for like Body Slams or Earthquakes. Even without Reflect, you can still like tank a few of those. Which is also just another good thing that makes Tapu Fini not very much of a gimmick. Because for yesterday's video, when I did Tapu Bulu, it can use the Light Screen and Reflect, and it could use them pretty well. But the issue is that whichever one you don't use, the other side can just easily take you out on. If you go for Reflect, then you just get killed by Blizzards. If you go for Light Screen, suddenly like Body Slams and with Paralysis or Zapdos' Drill Peck, those suddenly threaten you. And since Tapu Bulu mainly wants to set up Sword Stance and maybe go for a Nature's Madness, it just can't do everything at once, and it struggles really badly. The same cannot be said for Tapu Fini, because regardless of which Light Screen you use, or if it's like Reflect, you can still hold your own, regardless of what they set up on the field. So in reality, like, it still has unwinnable matchups, but they're unwinnable matchups where you can always do something if you really wanted to, which you probably don't want to, because one of Tapu Fini's biggest counters are other Pokemon with recovery, which I'm not even just talking about like Chansey and Starmie. Because Cloyster has Rest, that's basically also just a matchup that you can never actually kill Cloyster in. And even like something like Executor, let's assume that you're like Light Screen, Tapu Fini. Good chance that like sets with Leech Seed and Mega Drain become even better. And that, okay, I didn't actually record like Light Screen Tapu Fini versus Mega Drain and Leech Seed Executor, Kind of wish I did, because that sounds really funny. But always with Executor, you do have Blizzard. So you can still damage it pretty good. Same goes for Zapdos too, actually. Blizzard is a 3-hit KO. So overall, out of all the Pokemon I've gone over, this is by far the one that I could have been, like I couldn't have had a worse take on. But I am kind of glad that I'm wrong. Because we have, like, defensive Pokemon in Gen 1, but nothing like this. And having a Pokemon that is truly unkillable, but it suffers from having no recovery whatsoever, not even rest, that's interesting. And I don't think we have a Pokemon like that in other gens. Because even in other gens, you still have, like, leftovers, and, like, you know, you probably have rest. So even Pokemon like Swampert can't really be, like, be in the same category as Tapu Fini here. And that's pretty neat. Tapu Fini actually might be my favorite Pokemon with these 4 going over them so far. But we'll have to see how Tapu Lele does tomorrow. But for now, let's go into the replays, shall we? Starting off with the boy himself, Tauros. And here, you can see there, that's even without Reflect. And Tapu Fini took that very well. And like I said before, Tapu Fini wants to be paralyzed for the most part. So Tauros really doesn't want to go for Body Slam. But then what does it go for? Like, you can maybe have, you know, Thunderbolt. But even with Thunderbolt, you have 130 special defense. So you might even tank that better than the stab Body Slam. But I'm not sure. And then with Snorlax, it's funny because even if it's Amnesialax, I know some Amnesialaxes use Thunderbolt, but I'm pretty sure most use Ice Beam. So you don't really care about Snorlax using, you know, Amnesia too much. That means you can just maybe fish for a crit or go for just, well, probably anything you want. And that's another good thing about Tapu Fini. Even though its speed stat, I would say does not matter, 85 is pretty good. And a pretty good speed stat means you have a pretty good crit rate, even if you're paralyzed. Which is something that does mean it can win, theoretically, some matchups like Cloyster. Because while Cloyster with rest does become very annoying, theoretically, you can put it in a loop where you can, like... Or actually, I'll just wait until we actually get to the Cloyster replay, because that is by far the longest one. So be on the lookout for that. And Chansey here, you don't really have a way to hurt it. Maybe you can try to freeze it, but it probably won't work. So Chansey just has to, like, play the long game. But luckily, even with an unwinnable matchup like Chansey, one of the good things you can do is you can spam Nature's Madness and just drain out most of Chansey's South-Walled PP. Which, okay, yeah, it's an unwinnable matchup because by definition, you can never win it. But if you can have an unwinnable matchup where you're completely draining the opponent's resources, that's pretty good. Not so much with this one, you only made it use 4 South-Boileds, but I can see replays where that happens. And then with Alakazam, it has Recover. So it's like the Chansey situation, but way worse. Because Recover has twice the amount of power points that I think Nature Madness has. And Nature's Madness is only 90 accuracy. Most of the time, I'd argue it doesn't really matter. Because it's usually only using it once, and then the opponent's either switching out or you're like doing something else. But against Pokemon where you're spamming, you know, like Nature's Madness, with Pokemon that heal, like Starmie, Chansey, and Alakazam, then you definitely will feel the impact of not being 100% accurate. You will definitely miss Nature's Madness every once in a while, and when that happens, it will just give, like, a Chansey or whatever a chance to attack you. And oh boy, here is that matchup I was telling you about. Cloyster versus Tapu Fini. Like, I feel like this should be an unwinnable matchup. Like I was talking about, theoretically, there is a way you can win this. Because let's say you have a rest loop, right? So Cloyster goes for rest. You go for Nature's Madness. You go for 2 of them. And then once you go for 2 of them, the Cloyster, will have to rest again, most likely. We'll see here, alright? So, you do, most of its health. It goes to 26%. You're still faster, so you can go for a Surf there. It does 20. Barely not enough. But, theoretically there, you could go for a Surf, and you might be able to crit. I had at least one replay where that did happen. So, it just makes it weird. Do you stay in? Do you try to win the Cloyster matchup? I guess it just depends on your, team. But it's a weird situation where neither can really kill the other. Because, what does Cloyster really do? Does it go for Clamp? TAPU FINI can't hurt itself, so... maybe? I think it's hard to say. But I could see that maybe being the case. And funny enough, Cloyster, Blizzard is also one of those things where it's do you use it on TAPU FINI? Because if you freeze FINI, then that's obviously great, but FINI, with or without Light Screen, is not getting hurt by that Blizzard whatsoever. It is tanking it like a champ, and that's actually putting it very lightly. So, are you willing to burn your Blizzard PP on FINI, of all things? There is only 8 power points on Blizzard, and while FINI is tanky and it can't die, are you really gonna, waste it? It doesn't seem worth it. But at that point, is FINI gonna bother trying to waste all of its Nature's Madness power points on you? If it is, why? So we just have a weird situation where both can just completely get rid of the power points for the other. I feel like since Cloyster has rest, it's technically the one that you will usually win. But at that point, it's just what did you even win? Not really anything, for the most part. So, does this could go either way? Bad matchup? Unwinnable? Good? It's a weird situation where I feel like it goes in every single tier at once. If I could put Cloyster in all 5 tiers, I would. But since I can't, or I guess I could make a new tier list and just have 5 different Cloyster renders. But since I do not feel like doing that, I am just gonna put it in could go either way. Because I do not know what to make of it. And then Executor, you're faster, which, and like I said before, you have a decent crit rate. So, the matchup isn't that bad. If there was any Pokemon in this game that can burn a lot of sweep turns, it would be FINI. Even with, Psychic special drops, FINI, I feel like, doesn't have to worry too much or, at the very least, FINI can survive 1 special drop. But I think that's assuming it's with Light Screen, I think. But it doesn't matter. I think the matchup is a could go either way, which is pretty cool when it's, a water type that can take on Executor. But then again, Executor doesn't have Razor Leaf. Actually, here's a funny, or a question for today for you. If Executor had Razor Leaf, would it be better than Starmie? Let me know in the comments below. And I don't think there's much to say for Gengar. I said that very quickly. I don't think there is much to say about Gengar versus FINI. Gengar's faster, can put FINI to sleep, and with the Light Screen, it can tank a lot of Thunderbolts. It has no real way to really threaten Gengar otherwise. Sure, Gengar has no recovery, so Nature's Madness will always permanently do half its health. But Gengar is probably going to explode anyways, so I think it's inconsequential. And then Jolteon. I did one replay, and if it already has the Light Screen up, it does significantly better. In fact, with the Light Screen, it might be capable of killing the Jolteon. But also, it's a Jolteon. If it doesn't hit very hard, it's probably just going to crit. So I feel like even if you have a Light Screen up already, you should just not risk the Jolteon matchup to switch out there's not much you can really benefit. And Jinx is faster. It has, Lovely Kiss. And even if you have a white screen up, I feel like Jinx is just very dangerous anyways. Unlike with Executor, Jinx being faster means it has a much better crit rate. So if it's not just getting, like Psychics off with a 4 white screen anyways, a crit can be very dangerous. So I feel like it should be unwinnable, even though I don't really feel like that's what it truly is. It feels like it's in between unwinnable and bad matchup, if that makes any sense. Probably doesn't. And also, I'm just gonna move to the next replay. We're not even talking about Rhydon. There's really nothing to talk about. I just thought it would be funny to see a quick replay where something just gets O-code by FINI, because that practically never happens. And then Slowbro. This is debatably its worst matchup, or for FINI at least, because it can do Nature's Madness, but that is the only thing it can do. And it's doing it the Slowbro of all things. The Pokemon that always has rest. Or most of the time has rest. A few times on ladder, I have seen Slowbros with Amnesia, Surf, and Reflect instead of rest. And it's actually cringe. But here, we're assuming this is a good Slowbro set. And yeah, FINI just does nothing. And like I said before, sometimes for matchups like this, you do feel the impact of Nature's Madness only being 90%. Because here, if FINI just has a turn where it just misses completely, it just puts Slowbro in a really good position where it can, have a good amount of HP left, meaning that it's not even a situation where FINI can leave the Slowbro to be revenge killed. Also, I think it's funny. Most of the time when Slowbro gets a crit, it's rare, but it's actually not good, because the Slowbro has max special. So it actually does less damage. But here, because the FINI has a light screen, ironically, this is one of the few times where Slowbro gets a crit, but it's actually better than it hitting something with max special. You never see that, and I just find it funny. And next off, Starmie. You have Recovery, and you have Thunderbolt, and you are fast. As you can imagine, it means that FINI can do nothing to you. Absolutely nothing. It can tank a non-crit Thunderbolt pretty easily with Light Screen. It can maybe freeze you, but that's it. FINI just has nothing on Starmie. So there is absolutely no doubt about it. Starmie is the best bulky water type in Gen 1. And I think, just like how it's really hard to beat Mewtwo as the best legendary in Ubers, I think there's just practically nothing that can really threaten Starmie as the best bulky water in Gen 1. The only thing I can think about maybe is Jellicent, since it would be a bulky water with Recover and the Ghost type. But even then, it doesn't have Thunder Wave or the offensive stats that Starmie does. So I think Starmie will just never be surpassed as a bulky water type in Gen 1. And last but not least, we have Zapdos. Here's a replay where I wanted to be nice and let FINI use Light Screen. With Light Screen, it has a much better chance to potentially beat Zapdos. Zapdos' Thunderbolt is a 4-hit KO, while Blizzard is a 3-hit. And like I said, FINI does have a decent crit rate, which means you might be able to cheese. But at the same time, Zapdos has a better crit rate, so 5% more of the time, it will crit. And when Zapdos crits, it just OHKOs FINI. And here's one where FINI doesn't get Light Screen up in time. And as you can imagine, it just becomes unwinnable basically. So this is what happens if you use Reflect FINI instead. Although Reflect FINI is still very valid, because just being able to just completely just annihilate Tauros is just very funny. And I know it's not really annihilation, but basically, maybe, do both of these go in great? I'm not going to put Tauros in great, Because since it's tutorials, it's so capable of getting a lot of crits. And I forgot to move this. Holy crap, this should not be there. Okay, there we go. Now it's better. And I'm very indecisive with this tier list. I do not really know where to put a lot of these. So maybe you can just let me know where you would put everything. And what do you think? Do you think Tapu Fini would be a great OU Pokemon? Do you think it would be better than Starmie? Or do you think nothing can really challenge Starmie as a bulky water type? We only have one more Tapu left, and that's Tapu Lele, the psychic one, in Gen 1. Yeah, there's definitely no doubt that Tapu Lele is going to be good. But how good are we talking? Like, do you think that Tapu Lele will be better than FINI and Coco? Because I feel like it's going to be very competitive between Coco, FINI, and Lele. My money's going to be on Tapu Koko probably being the best one. But I guess there's only one way to find out, and that's by watching my video tomorrow. So, I hope to see you there. And until next time, this is Groundback, and I look forward to hearing from you.